Let's get back to the basics. Basic lands. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of The Draw Step. Today, we are talking about lands. Basic lands, non-basic lands. What really inspired me to make this video is I was playing with some friends the other day. My friend was playing one of his objectively stronger decks, and he cracked a Myriad landscape, went to tutor for, two lands that share a land type, and he realized he only had one of each type of basic land. So he then was not able to, do the Myriad landscape. He wasn't able to get the two basic lands onto the battlefield tapped, which then got me thinking. Obviously, non-basic lands can be very strong. They can help with mana fixing. Shoot, these days there are cards like Ishgard, the Holy Sea from Final Fantasy. There's obviously a lot more from the Final Fantasy set, but they stapled freaking adventures onto lands. So you're getting other abilities, not just other abilities, but like it's an additional card in your deck on top of being a land. So there is so much value, undeniable value that you get from non-basic lands. But on the other hand, a lot of them do enter tapped. A lot of them can have some other drawbacks when you're trying to tutor for things like, playing a rampant growth or something like that. You're stuck only being able to pull non-basic lands anyway. So my question to you, I want to hear from you guys down in the comments below. How many basic lands versus non-basic lands do you play in your decks? In my opinion, I normally, as far as total land base goes, I normally run between 35 to 39, somewhere in there, for my commander decks. I find that to be a really good balance as far as making sure I'm hitting my land drops, but also not just being, swamped in land. As far as non-basic or basic lands go, as far as how many basic lands go, it does depend on how many colors are in your commander's identity, I believe. If you're running a, 2-color or 3-color commander, I personally feel like you need at least 3, maybe even 4 basic lands of each color type. I think that having at least that 3 to 4 range gives you that ability to just play lands untapped, to be able to search for them, to give you that flexibility. Now, that being said, there are a couple other things when it comes to lands that I wanted to, kind of discuss and again, hear feedback from you guys. The first one, and this video may be a little bit scattered, but I'll try to stay on topic here. The first one is Temple of the False God. This card I have watched as a commander player really kind of fall from grace. I know a lot of precons, even some that Wizards of the Coast is putting out today, but a lot of the older ones especially, that was a staple. Every single one of the precons came with a Temple of the False God in it, tapping for 2 mana. Now, the caveat being that you have to have 5 lands on the battlefield in order for it to turn on and start using. So the argument being, or the argument against it being that, hey, I have to wait until a lot of times turn 4 or 5 to be able to start using this land. So it's basically a dead card in my hand in that early game. And early game is so important for speeding things up, getting up and running. And that's why, again, if you have a bunch of lands that enter tapped, using those in the early game, that can really slow you down. So the Temple of the False God, on the other hand, though, it can be really strong if you can ramp, if you're getting to that 5 on a curve. If you could do like turn 3, if you play like a Farseek, a Cultivate, getting more lands out there, then having that 2 additional mana, that is super strong. So again, I want to hear in the comments below, do you think Temple of the False God is a good include, or is that something you try to stay away from and just look at it as a dead card or a useless card? Because you get to a certain point in the game, right? Everybody has had this happen. You get to turn 7, turn 8, the game is going on for a little bit. You got plenty of mana out. You can play all your cards. Your hand is running low, and now you're just top decking mana, right? You could afford just about anything, but you don't really have any cards to play. So at that point, Temple of the False God, again, is no longer really worthwhile. Speaking of being able to tap for 2 mana on a land, there are the bounce lands, right? So you got like a Golgari Rot Farm. There's is it Boil Works? There's bounce lands for all of the 2-color identity. This is an interesting one. I used to put this in all of my 2-color decks. My thought being, hey, I am, obviously tapping a land and getting 2 mana out of it. As time has gone on, though, I've really started to shy away from them because obviously, as the name applies, bounce land, you are having to, in order to play that card, you're having to send a land back to your hand and it's entering tapped. So objectively, this is not only setting you back, but not really putting you ahead either. Depending on where you're going in the turn rotation, you're pretty much just staying on par with everybody else as far as how much mana you can produce off your lands, even having a land out that taps for 2. So I feel like it really depends on the deck, how much you're ramping, and if you can take advantage of having a land that taps for 2. There are some cards or effects that say untap target land, or being able to take advantage of that extra mana on it. You can get ahead, and then it makes a lot of sense to have that in your deck. But for me, in about most 2-color or 3-color decks, I no longer think it's an auto include. I do not think that you necessarily have to have that bounce land in it, or that it even makes sense to have the bounce land in it. Because if you don't play it right, you may end up just setting yourself back, setting yourself behind the curve. Some other things as far as it goes to non-basic lands. I want to circle back to what I was talking about with the adventures with Final Fantasy. I feel like cards like these, where it's if you're playing a monocolor deck, really anywhere up to 3 colors in a deck, these just make too much sense to not play if you have one. Anything that can give you a tactical advantage stapled onto a card, yes, use it. Of course, use it. Oh, it's a no-brainer. Not necessarily an adventure or anything, but I think there are certain other no-brainer include lands. For instance, Bojuka Bog. This is one that any monocolor black deck auto include. Most decks I have that have black in the commander color identity, I am putting one of these bogs in it. With it, exiling target player's graveyard, there is so much ability for players to mess with their graveyard. Reanimate spells, or moving cards from into or from the graveyard. Being able to shut that down to take out an opponent's graveyard so they lose that ability, or at least those cards in their graveyard already, that can be huge for a player like a reanimate deck. A lot of zombies do that sort of thing. That can completely ruin their game plan by having it. So it just makes sense to put that in your deck and be able to have that ability and not have to spend an extra card slot on that. Some other really good, solid, non-basic lands are things like the Haunted Mire. They have this again for all of the 2-colored lands, where it actually does say, Swamp Forest. So if you have something that says, get a forest card, put it onto the battlefield. This is an instance where I am totally fine playing a land that just enters tapped. It doesn't do anything else when it enters tapped. It doesn't, scry 1, gain a life, do 1 damage, that sort of thing. It just enters tapped, taps for a black or a green. But the ability to be able to go tutor for it, that's great. That is super strong. Path of Ancestry. This is another one that I find in a lot of commander decks, a lot pre-cons. I've seen people, do deck building and they put Path of Ancestry into it just because it's such a popular card. I don't think you have to. I really don't think it's actually very strong. It enters tapped. Yes, it makes any color in your commander's color identity, but you could also just play a command tower. Like, if you just need one color in your identity, do that. The Scry 1, if you play a creature of your commander's type, that is really only good in decks that care about commander creature type. So don't just automatically put that in every one. If you're playing like an elf deck or I don't know, elementals, I guess, are popular right now. If you play something like that, sure, then I guess it would make sense using it for that slot. But just being able to scry and drop a tapped land, not really the strongest ability. Now, my final thought when it comes to non-basic lands, and this may be considered a bit of a hot take. I know it's a bit of a commander taboo, but I personally believe we need more land destruction, okay? Wizards of the Coast have been pumping out so many non-basic lands. It used to be, you would run primarily basic lands, and there were a few super strong non-basics that you would put in your deck. But now, again, with like Final Fantasy doing those adventures on lands, some of the absurd broken abilities that are just stapled to land cards. There's there's an ice one where it has the cumulative upkeep, so you gotta be constantly paying for it. But it also protects you from damage. I'm gonna have it on screen here. I cannot think of the name of it right now, but that can be so broken. There's so many broken non-basic lands that are in the format now that people are putting into decks. I wouldn't say it's a requirement, but I feel like it's almost getting to that point where we have to be able to have a way to interact with them in our decks. So you may hate land destruction. I understand it's not super popular. Not everybody is going to love it. But if someone has a way to play a card that like buffs their whole board or gives them all this extra advantage, and we just as a community cannot interact with it because of a taboo, that is a foolish decision on our part. So, in 2026, hashtag make land destruction great again. Oof, that's going to get me in trouble. Don't do that. Let's not say that. But we all, have to work on overcoming some of these taboos. And I could get into a whole separate video on commander taboos or like rule zero things that I think are kind of overrated or that we need to relook at. But again, let me know in the comments below. Am I full of crap? Should we not do land destruction? Should we keep that as its own sanctified thing off to the side? I want to know. These are just some of the different thoughts I have on lands. Lands are a clearly critical part of this game. I want to hear from you guys what you think. Let me know in the comments below if you like videos like this. We drop new videos every Friday. Make sure you subscribe, ring the bell notification so you don't miss a single episode, and I'll see y'all next time.